Okay, all right. You, Jeff Charles fans, you're gonna have to jump ahead because we gotta get started on this show here. We are still connecting with Jeff. What's up, guys? It is 9:03 a.m. U.S. Pacific Daylight Time here in Los Angeles. I'm James Hake. This is the Hake Report. It's Wednesday, April 28th, 2021. I had to check the date. And we are connecting on D-Live. Wait a sec. Okay. Connecting on Twitch, Facebook, YouTube, Periscope, Trovo. And I gotta toggle this D-Live thing. I do have a special guest coming up for you guys. And you can call in. I think he will be happy to take your calls. His name is Jeff Charles. He was on my show it feels like more than a year ago, but it was less than a year ago. It was June of 2020 when he was last on the show. Major echo, Hake. Echo problem, they're saying. Thank you guys for the heads up. Double speaking. Awesome, says Chrissy. What in the world? I think it's because when you restart, the settings get all messed up, huh? What a shame. Hang on, guys. We will be getting going. And I will have this guest. Audio is doubling, says Doom Jesus. Thank you, man. Appreciate it. Let me toggle the D-Live once again. Men's Forum is canceled this coming Thursday. Not this coming Thursday, but the following Thursday. First Thursday of the month. Normally we do have a Men's Forum. Okay, we're live on D-Live as well. Nice. That was awesome. Echo. Is it better? Press 1 for perfect. Press 2 for still echoing. Press 3 if it's garbled and you don't care. James is trying to sound like God with the echo effect. Joel never did that. What did I say? What did I say?
Excuse me.
There it is. Shout out to the great Herman Cain. The late, great Herman Cain. So, 2? Still getting 2s? Are you serious? Just leave it like this, why not? Still echoing. Yep, that's what they're saying. Ginger Jesus, is that you? No. What in the world? Talking into a porta potty. Is he talking into a porta potty? So hang on. We will be getting to the guest. I'll give you the timestamps after the fact, okay, guys? The timestamps. Always useful in the YouTube description and the YouTube top comment. I'll pin the comment on YouTube. Reverberate. Restart, says A. Owens. What duh? So, thank you, guys. So anyway, guys, I will be getting to my guest back on, Jeff Charles. At Jeff on the right. I'll tell you all about him in a minute. I have some questions for him to have him back on air. Many of you, since my audience has grown since June of 2020, it sounds cool. Read the 10 Commandments, says Jim Eagle. Hake needs more tungsten. What does tungsten do, Penny Roo? Or Peter R? You know, over in Maricopa, they're doing a 2020 recount. It is crazy. Seems a little late to be doing a 2020 recount or audit. Election audit is really what they're doing, but they're hand counting as well. And studying. Fix the audio, please, says Mississippi hippie. Actually, without the please. Hang on. There's this Obama guy who was suspected of stealing $200,000 from a charter school that he helped found. Lots of mess going on. Minimum wage going up. Communist is what I say. Communist. My guest who's coming up. And hang on, we are fixing the audio, I think. We're still working on it. Boomer tech. Boomer tech. Or black tech. Or is that so mean? Is that mean to say? He's getting ready to sing to us. Beta audio. Man, what is going on? Fix the audio, Tyler Fairley says. No more echo, says Ian Riot. Is the echo better? Sound is good. Sound is good. Press 1 for good. Fixed kinda, says Colin Barrett. What? Better audio. It's fixed now. 1. Oh, gosh. Hake is fixed. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. It's only 9:08 a.m. here in Los Angeles. Hake gets the red-headed stepchild treatment from the black engineers, or the black engineer. There's only one now, because Joel Friday left. Joel Friday no longer here. All right, guys. So since it is 9:08 already, do we have the guest already? Is he connected? We're going to connect with the guest here. In that case, shall I play any music, or can you do two things at once? Two things at a time?
It's like a lot of switching back.
Okay, all right. We will be connecting with the guest. I'm not going to inundate you with my 20-year-old Christian music right now, guys. We are going to connect with the guest in the coming minutes here. Just a quick news item. Minimum wage, before I get to the guest. Are you Jewish, Hake? Nope, I am not. I wish. And we are getting the guest on air for you guys right now. Minimum wage. Yesterday, sleepy President Joe Biden issued an executive order raising the minimum wage for federal contract workers to $15 an hour. 15? Fight for 15. That was what the McDonald's strikers wanted. The hike's set to take effect in March, I guess, of next year. Next year. I cracked a little bit, growing. Which could mean bigger paychecks for thousands of federal workers who are currently at $10.95 an hour. Administration officials believe the change will address some inequality, boost productivity and morale among contractors. Republicans and some moderate Dems say that will lead to job cuts. Yeah, I mean, one great thinker said that the minimum wage is the most anti-black policy that he could think of. And that was decades ago, because you're getting rid of some excellent jobs. Audio sounds great. Thank you. Thank you, Mississippi Hippie. Are we ready? We are just about ready. Okay, guys. But I have to play my intro song at least. All right, guys. It is 9:10. Let's get right on with the show.
1, 2, 3.
So, how are you all doing? I am fine. I am James Hake. This is the Hake Report. It is Wednesday, April 28th, 2021, the year of our Lord, Anno Domini. No, it's not CE. Don't call it Common Era. That's secularist. I have with me my scheduled guest, am I right? Back with me, Jeff Charles, on Twitter, at Jeff on the Right, a black conservative / libertarian, I believe, a writer.
Yes.
Returns for a second interview about the mess going on with this racism and quote-unquote justice in America. Jeff Charles is a contributor for redstate.com and libertynation, I believe.com, and co-host of the Red and Black, or Red Plus Black show and Breaking Conservatarian podcast. Check out his YouTube channel, which is called A Fresh Perspective with Jeff Charles. And you can check out his prior interview on my show from last year. It feels like more than a year, but it was only June 7th, 2020, Sunday. It's on YouTube, Podbean, and you will be able to get the He was my prior board operator. Dude, no sound. What the? Hang on. Hang on. Relax.
We're going to start doing sign language.
Yeah. I don't know it. But we've seen a lot of sign language lately, man.
Yeah.
Ever since these COVID things. You're on mute, Hake. Someone get Bill.
Sorry, Bill's coming in. There's something wrong with the output on Wirecast.
Something wrong with the output on Wirecast. Hang on, guys. I think we're cursed. It's kind of like everything that can go wrong does go wrong.
It's probably the Russians or the Chinese.
No, it's the deep state. No.
That too, yeah.
It's it might just be boomer tech. What they call boomer tech. Something wrong with the output on Wirecast, Bill. Chad is saying there is sound. Oh, there is sound now? Sound is back? Sound is back. Press 1 if it's back. Gone. If it's still gone, you can't press 3 because you can't hear me. Man. How long do you have, by the way? Because with this,
I got time.
Okay.
We're good.
All right.
Yeah.
Cool. Because if we echo, says Emerald Eyes. Thank you. BLM, yeah. Cold because it's true. Can you hear the guests and sound? Can you hear the guests and sound?
Well, we can hear the guest.
Man, this is brutal. I'm going to be talking. Those of you listening on the audio feed probably can hear me. So, guys, bear with us because I'm live on an audio feed as well as the video streams. Guys who are listening on the audio feed, I'm going to be talking with Jeff Charles is my guest. Jeff on the right on Twitter. And he has a YouTube channel called A Fresh Perspective with Jeff Charles. And that's where you can find, I believe that's where you can find his podcast, The Red and Black Show. Is that where that is?
No, the Red and Black Show is separate. It's got its own channel, but A Fresh Perspective. I don't do Breaking Conservatarian anymore. I rebranded it, and so now it's A Fresh Perspective with Jeff Charles.
Oh, sweet. Okay. Nice. So that channel can be found. If we search Red plus Black Show on YouTube, we can find that channel?
Yes.
Nice. Okay.
Yes.
Findable on YouTube. Make that note. I'm going to be talking with him about Black Democrats, Republicans' failure, and the and many other things. Infighting, there's a lot of infighting. The media being anti-white, why? And many other things. We got into some arguments. Well, I kind of call them arguments, yeah. The audio goes out when the guest camera is on stream. It's when it's just Hake, we can hear everyone fine. Nice. Okay. Leave him off screen, Hake. Says how computers smell. No, we would like to get him on. If anybody can do it, it is, okay, so you guys can hear me, since it is just me on the screen. Well, Jeff, I guess while we're waiting for this to get put together, I can still talk to you. You just can't.
Yeah.
The people just can't see you. Okay. And in that case, then, the Derek Chauvin conviction. It is 9:20 here, and we're getting going. The Derek Chauvin conviction, was that actual justice, or was it mob justice, also known as social justice, in your opinion?
I think it was justice. And at first, I didn't think he was going to get the other two charges. I thought it was just going to be manslaughter because there was an intent involved. And usually, and this is different for every state, usually intent has to be involved. But then I found out that for the second degree and third degree, these were specifically unintentional. So intent doesn't play into this at all. So this is if you're doing something illegal or something you shouldn't be doing and it ends up in somebody dying, even if you didn't intend for them to die. I don't believe that Chauvin wanted to kill George Floyd, but his actions were reckless. He should have known better. And there's just no excuse for kneeling on somebody's neck for 9 minutes and not even trying to render medical care and all that stuff. I think the prosecution laid out their case very convincingly. I thought the defense did a good job too with what they had. I think they did the best they could with what they had. But at the end of the day, it was going to be too difficult to convince people that the knee on the neck had nothing to do with George Floyd's death because the evidence just didn't bear that out. And I saw that from the beginning. It's just a lot of people left out certain parts that could show that it was the knee, but focusing only on the drugs leaves out a lot of stuff that the medical examiner said in that report because they determined that his death was a homicide. Now, that doesn't automatically mean it's murder, but it means that he was killed by somebody else's actions. So I think a lot of people on the right were surprised by the verdict because a lot of people were telling them that the medical examiner said that he died of an overdose when the person never actually said that.
So isn't it a scam to have a law in which you do something, no intention to kill anybody, but they call it murder? Isn't that a setup? Because now people are going around thinking that he intentionally, because the layperson doesn't know this distinction. The layperson is going around saying, oh, George Floyd was murdered. And the way they mean it is this guy maliciously, willfully murdered George Floyd in front of everybody.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of weird how Minnesota does their laws because I don't think that's the case in a lot of other states. I think in a lot of other states, like murder, there has to be some intent behind it. But they do have other classifications for what we're talking about here. When somebody takes an action that they shouldn't be taking, something that could be illegal or something that could be considered assault, and it ends up in somebody's death. Right. I mean, it may even have a similar sentence to what Chauvin could be facing up to, but they don't call it the same thing. So I think it's a little weird how they put that label on there. But I'm not going to say that when they first came up with the law, they came up with it specifically for that purpose, right? I mean, they didn't make that law to say, well, when Chauvin kills George Floyd in the future, we're going to call him a murderer. But yeah, it is kind of weird the way that law was set up.
Yeah, to me, it seems much more reasonable to call it manslaughter. I get it if you're robbing a bank and somebody gets killed in the course of you robbing a bank, and I will be taking guest questions. Yeah, you guys can call in. 888-775-3773. I get that if you're committing some other felony, that could be considered a murder because you're willingly taking people's lives in your hands, right? I've heard that, drunk drivers, for example, if they're like a repeat offender and they kill somebody, that's considered you can be charged with murder in that case.
Yes.
But are you a fan of this guy, Keith Ellison, the Attorney General from Minnesota?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
I mean, I have nothing but fire for Keith Ellison.
Yeah. I saw him on 60 Minutes, a little clip of him on 60 Minutes being interviewed by Scott Pelley on CBS. And he was saying all this quote unquote right things like, I feel sorry for him. He's human too. We're all human. George Floyd was human. And we don't want to dehumanize him. This is not about revenge against Derek Chauvin, but it's absolutely about this narrative of racist policing. The cops are disproportionately targeting blacks. And it's like all based on a false narrative is what the outcry is over. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that two things can be true at once. I mean, what Derek Chauvin did was wrong, and I think he'll get the sentence that he deserves. There is an issue of police brutality, and that doesn't just include fatal encounters. I'm talking about also non-fatal encounters, like if you think of Rodney King, stuff like that. It's been shown that that's more likely to happen to Black people. And people like Keith Ellison are exploiting that, and they are exploiting Black trauma to push a Marxist agenda. And they've been doing it for years. They're still doing it. And unfortunately, on the right, we don't really have much of a good answer to that because we chose not to engage in the conversation in a meaningful way. So you've got the progressives who are making it sound like police are just out in the streets, just shooting Black people random, willy-nilly. And we're not taking a sensible response to it. So I do think that both are true. And what the progressives are doing, and it's a lot of it is white progressives. They love this stuff, because they get to use it to promote their agenda, and they don't have much opposition.
Yeah. I have noticed that more and more like libertarians, as well as some of the rougher around the edges conservatives and Christians and whites and others, they criticize the cops where the cops may violate some constitutional thing or other. They don't know the Constitution and stuff like that. But it's so, like you said, it's so, or like I think you agree, it's so dishonest from the left. What did Derek Chauvin do that was wrong? I mean, you said knee on the neck. There's no reason to have the knee on the neck for 9 minutes. But that was within policy to have the knee on the neck or the shoulder blade neck area. What did he do? I mean, they called the ambulance, right? They were waiting. He asked to be put on the ground, and he was saying he couldn't breathe even before they got on him, it seemed like. What did he do that was against the law, per se, really? I mean, they said it was assault, right? But how was it assault? Is the audio still good, guys? Press 1 if the audio is good. Echo again? Hold that thought, Jeff. I appreciate it.
Okay, you got it.
Echo now with the guy on screen. Cyber Hake. Echo. Knee on the shoulder, says Jim Justice. Robo Echo. Thank you, guys. Appreciate the live chat. And Nicolas making this work. Okay. Better now? Better now? Hake Trom. Beta. Hake talking into a PVC tube. I appreciate your patience, Jeff. And listeners, those of you listening on the live audio feed, you can be listening on TalkStream Live. TalkStreamLive.com plays the Jesse Lee Peterson Show and the Hake Report. JLP Live also. JLP Live app. And I have Jeff Charles with me at Jeff on the right. A Fresh Perspective with Jeff Charles is one of his YouTube channels. And he also has the Red and Black Show. I think you can search Red plus Black Show on YouTube and find that. A writer for Red State and Liberty Nation. I think he calls himself a Conservatarian. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
And a Conservatarian is one of the criticisms that some of the Groyper types, you know, the conservative Christians, whites, young kids, have against the Con Inc. But that's not your criticism of Con Inc. Your criticism of Con Inc. is something different, which we'll get to. But
Yeah.
But is it better now?
Yeah.
Okay, I want the answer to what Chauvin did that was. I mean, you already said it was wrong, but was it illegal? What did he do that was?
Yeah. So I mean, so if you look at the testimony of Police Chief Arredondo and some of the other officers that testified, they said what I expected them to say, because that maneuver is in their manual.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of them are saying that it isn't part of their active training, but it is in the manual. So I think that's kind of how people intended to cover for it. But it was the length of time. Like if he had had the knee on the neck for like 30 seconds or a minute, got him under control, then gotten off, then I think Floyd would still be alive today. There were other things that they could have done. I mean, if you look at what people were testifying to in court, they could have sat him up. They could have sat him up on his back so he's upright, but still sitting down. He wanted to be on the ground. He did say that, but he didn't ask for a knee on his neck. So what the issue at hand is the fact that he knelt on his neck for 9 minutes. I know that there were parts of that where he was more on the upper shoulder blade, but if you look at Dr. Tobin's testimony, that is still going to restrict your ability to inhale and exhale. Most of that time he was on the neck. So that is where the assault comes in, because it was unnecessary. And he continued to do it even after Floyd was unconscious. So it was just so blatant and egregious that there was no way to say that, you know, he was following procedure, which is exactly what the use of force experts testify to. It's exactly what the police chief testified to as well.
Isn't it a mitigating factor, the fact that they had these crowds around them yelling and cussing and video recording and all that stuff, and saying, well, one of them said, he is human, bro, get off him, which I could sympathize with a little bit. But there was this fireman woman who called the police bitches and sorry guys, I don't like to use that word, in that incident, and like, it was a lot of confusion, and that's like not helping the situation. Isn't that a mitigating factor?
Not in what Chauvin did, no. I mean, I would be outraged too if I'm seeing somebody kneeling on somebody's neck and it's going on and on and on and on and on. I mean, and people were also talking to Floyd saying, hey, you know, relax or whatever, even though at that time he was already handcuffed. He wasn't really able to do much. So police officers are supposed to be able to handle those situations. If they can't handle those situations, they shouldn't be police officers. So I don't think that the crowd contributed to what happened to Floyd. I mean, that was an excuse that the defense brought up, but I didn't think it was a very good one. Derek Chauvin didn't seem very flustered at all. I mean, he was stoic. And some people were saying that it was more of a pride issue. Like, I'm not going to get off his neck because you're telling me to. So, I mean, even if that's what was going on in his head, which we can't possibly know that,
right,
it doesn't provide an excuse.
That was so disgusting, the way that they did this to the Covington Catholic school boy too. That racist smirk, you know, the guy when the American Indian activist was beating the drum right in his face, and he had a smirk, that racist smirk on his face. I felt that that's unfair to try to mind read what Chauvin or this Nicholas Sandman were doing. Of course, Nicholas Sandman did absolutely nothing wrong. And Chauvin, I don't know. It seems like conjecture to me to say that George Floyd would be alive today were it not for Derek Chauvin's knee on Floyd's neck. It seemed, and there were other guys on his body too, and Floyd's other knee was maybe on the other part of his body, right? And they were saying that was all part of the restriction of his breathing, the people on his body, especially on his torso.
That was probably part of it too. Now, I don't know how their trials are going to turn out, because I don't think that they were the main factor in it. But
it seems like such guesswork. It seems like so vague to say that this knee killed George Floyd. Doesn't it seem ridiculous? Because they're relying on one guy's testimony, and there's been other opinions, you know, professional opinions about it, and we're relying on experts when common sense would say, okay, it didn't look right, but we don't know. And this guy was clearly overdosing. He had tripled the level of fentanyl in his system that normally kills people.
But that's the thing, though. Nobody said he was overdosing. No medical professional, none of the people who examined him said that he overdosed. And that's the part that people leave out. I mean, they say that he did have a high level of fentanyl in his system. During the trial, they showed that other people who had that level of fentanyl, a lot of them still survived. Now, I'm assuming they got medical care, like George Floyd didn't. They didn't have.
But they were waiting for it. They were waiting for it.
They were waiting for it, but again, while you're waiting for
ambulance.
it, you're kneeling on his neck for 9 minutes. So I think if they had sat him up a little bit, waited for the ambulance to come, he would still be alive. The medical examiner for Hennepin County ruled that the manner of his death was a homicide.
Would they have gotten on him had he not resisted arrest for the 7 minutes prior?
Maybe not. But
probably not.
But resisting arrest does not give a police officer to have carte blanche to do whatever the hell they want.
I know, But
and
they
at the
wouldn't.
time that he was on the ground, he was no longer resisting. Remember, he had the handcuffs on him. He was laying face down. He wasn't resisting at that moment.
He was moving around and writhing at first.
Say what?
He was moving around and writhing at first.
You mean when he was on the ground?
When he was on the ground.
Yeah, maybe for a few seconds, but he said thank you when he got on the ground. He wanted to be there.
I know, but listen,
he wanted the knee on the neck.
Didn't we see him sitting? Nobody sitting on him. He was sitting against a wall, right? Wasn't he just? They let him lounge around a little bit, and then he started resisting arrest and get me out of the car.
Yeah, he don't want to get in the car. Yeah,
all that stuff.
Yeah, he was resisting.
I don't think it's reasonable to say that they would have been on him even had he not resisted arrest. I mean, I know you didn't say that, but you said that they might have, but they didn't before.
The thing is, we don't know. But what I do know is that his resisting doesn't give them the excuse to do whatever they want.
Right. I'm not arguing that either. But I don't.
It's always a bad idea to resist arrest. I mean, I'm not advocating for resisting arrest.
And you mentioned
do it. I'm just saying it doesn't provide a justification.
You mentioned that blacks are disproportionately affected by police so-called brutality, but that's because they're disproportionately resisting arrest. By and large, like they have an attitude with cops. They like 8 times more likely to, or 9 times more likely to resist arrest are the numbers that came out of, I believe, San Francisco one recent year. People are kind of totally glossing, I'm not saying you are, but people are totally glossing over the fact that these blacks that are getting in trouble with the cops, most of them are acting out of control.
I mean, I'm not familiar with that study, but I mean, the study that I'm talking about came from Harvard, and this
Liberals.
actually, this study, which is interesting because this study found that there was no racial bias when it comes to fatal shootings of police.
Right.
Yeah, but it also found that black people are more likely to get roughed up, whether they're resisting or not. And even disparities in crime rates do not fully account for this difference. So,
but there's a big disparity in attitude that's not accounted for in the crime.
A lot of times that's not accounted for. But I will say that I'm talking about excessive force. I'm not talking about the amount of force you need to get somebody under control who's actually resisting.
Yeah.
I don't care what color they are. If you're resisting, then the police get to use a certain level of force.
Right.
That's not my issue. My issue is when it's excessive, when they're getting beaten up for not resisting, or if somebody just mouths off and the cop hauls off and pops them in the head with a flashlight or whatever. Like that's the stuff I'm talking about.
Okay. That's the other thing. It's such a scam. Lawyers, I do not like lawyers because it seems like there are cities that are paying out thousands and hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of dollars, maybe even year after year, I don't know, in cases of supposed, lawsuits for excessive force or whatever, or even so-called wrongful deaths. And in many cases, they were completely justified. For example, Mike Brown, the case of Mike Brown. All the evidence points to what's his name being justified in his taking down of Mike Brown over in Ferguson, Missouri. Yet the so-called family, I say so-called because the parents weren't married, it was a mess. Didn't they get like millions of dollars or $1.something million in a settlement from Ferguson? And Breonna Taylor, I mean, that was another case where she kind of brought it on herself in a sense with all this having formerly dated that drug dealer and then the boyfriend firing upon the officers, whether he knew they were cops or not. These people are getting rewarded for poorly raising their loved ones, essentially. You know what I mean? It's such a scam.
Yeah, I mean, in the case of Mike Brown, I'm not sure what they got as far as settlement goes, but I mean, I don't believe the left's narrative on that. I mean, the facts came out. But in Breonna Taylor's case, I mean, I don't think you can't say that, because she dated a guy, then she gets to die and the government shouldn't be held accountable.
No, it's not. I'm just saying, I mean, the boyfriend fired out on the cops, and what are they supposed to do?
Yeah, but again, they let the boyfriend off because obviously he didn't realize that it was police that he was firing at.
He claims, and they have no proof, right? They can't prove that he knew.
If they wanted to prove, if they wanted him in jail, he would be in jail, because I mean, he did fire at a police officer,
Right.
But at the same time, they found that through their questioning of him and whatever evidence they had, that this was not something that was intentional. So that case is pretty complicated. I mean,
Yeah, I know. There's a lot of stuff going. But I'm just talking about in general, these payouts, ridiculous.
Some might be and some might not be. I mean, if the government oversteps its bounds, if a government official oversteps their bounds and it winds up in somebody being hurt or killed, they should be punished for it. There should be judgments against them.
What do you think about this Ashli Babbitt situation? You familiar at all with it? Where
Yeah, honestly, I don't know why y'all waited until now to start complaining about it. I was complaining about it when it first happened. I mean, honestly, and I'm not saying that you personally, I'm just talking about a lot of conservative commentators. They're bringing her up now because of Chauvin. I'm like, no, you should have been complaining about this before. She was unarmed.
Right.
She wasn't a threat. She shouldn't have been killed. I don't agree with what she was doing.
Right.
She was in the middle of committing a crime.
Yeah.
Just like we always talk about with black people. She was in the middle of committing a crime.
True.
And got shot to death. That officer should be held accountable. We should know who that person is. And I read earlier today that her family is suing the Capitol Police. I hope they get a payout because her death was wrong.
Yeah. Okay. We have the lines are full, and I do. If you are able to take calls, I do want to take calls, and I may want to hold you over past the beginning of the next hour.
That's fine.
If you're able. Time. Okay. But last time we had to gloss over this. I was running out of time. And I wanted to talk about black Democrat voters. Mm-hmm. I don't think either of us want blacks to be Democrat voters. Although it seems like you might have said you want blacks involved in both parties, come to think of it. But anyway, by and large, it's not good for them to be voters for Democrats, right? I say. Whose fault is that? Is that cowardly Republicans? Or is it their own dumb fault? Or both?
I would say if you know the history, you know that the majority of it is the Republicans' fault. And I actually did a video on this a while ago. I did a 3-hour live stream talking about the entire history, going from
I think I saw that.
The end of
You put it on your IG, right? I mean, you announced it on your IG. Instagram.
I announced it on my Instagram, yes, but it is on YouTube. And I broke it up into separate sections as well. So if you don't want to watch the whole 3-hour video, you can just watch each section. But the history, it started back right after Reconstruction, when Republicans decided that they wanted to start favoring more white voters in the South. And Democrats had to do the same thing too, by the way. I mean, this didn't start out as a Republican-Democrat issue. It started out as a North and South issue.
Yeah.
And so, you had the Lily White movement, which systematically stripped black people of power in the Republican Party because black people were essential to the foundation of the Republican Party. The Republicans and black people were like this, like close. And then this movement cropped up, and that began the eventual exodus from the Republican Party to the Democratic Party. The bottom line is that all throughout its history, Republicans have rejected black voters. I mean, we can go up to Barry Goldwater, who straight out said, we need to stop trying to court black voters. He killed it. He killed black outreach in the GOP. And they've been using that approach ever since. And I will say that while all this was going on, I make it a point in my video, there were always people in the Republican Party pushing back against this evolution that they were going through, because they saw we need to go back to our roots and build trust with the black community again. And I'm just giving you a thumbnail. There's actually a lot more to this, but the overall, but the bottom line is, when you know the history, you know it was the Republican Party that pushed black people away. It wasn't black people who just left because they liked socialism. 80% of black people identify as either moderate or conservative. So if they're not voting for Republicans, that right there tells you that Republicans are doing something wrong, and they have been doing it for decades, and people on the right don't want to talk about it. But now we're gonna talk about it.
You, in the last time that I talked with you, you talked about how Republicans don't support local Republican politicians who are trying to run in these majority black or high concentration black communities. And you're saying that does that translate to them not voting Republican nationally too? Because nationally they have a choice. Locally they may not have a choice, but nationally they have a choice. They could. There's some sensible blacks out there who vote Republican Which, I mean, I guess that there's a lot of rhinos, so how sensible is that really? But is that what you're saying?
Well, I mean, if you're talking about national, like presidential elections,
Yeah.
again, same thing. What did Trump do differently than Mitt Romney, John McCain?
He was real.
And he also asked for black people to vote for him. He
Right.
also addressed the black community directly.
Yeah.
I mean, Trump didn't do everything perfectly. I mean, I have a lot of criticism for Trump, but what he did right is he actually talked to black people. He set up, black voices for Trump. He tried to get the vote. That's why he increased it. We saw the same thing with Eisenhower. When he first ran for president, he only got like 20% of the black vote. He didn't really try all that hard. But when he ran for re-election, he actually started putting more effort into getting black votes. And when he was reelected, he got 39% of the black vote. This isn't rocket science. All it takes is for a Republican president to try and to actually court black votes. Mike Huckabee, when he ran for governor of Arkansas, 48% of the black vote. That was unheard of. It's still unheard of. All he did was build relationships with black communities, black leaders, black figures in his state, and cultivate those relationships, and not just do it when it's time for getting elected. And he was real. So, I mean, yeah, so black people do have a choice, but they're not going to choose the person who ignores them or who
Right.
who demeans them.
True.
That's just common sense.
Some of these blacks who try to run for office, I've noticed, they kind of beg for money and for attention, or they complain that they're not getting support from the GOP, which, I mean, I get that the GOP is a bunch of rhinos. They're not for what's right. But isn't it kind of cringeworthy when they start begging for the money and attention from these people and complain? Because I've just seen, I don't know anybody, I can't name anybody offhand, but I've seen different black Republicans, whether it's women or men, sometimes even men, running for office, local office, mayor, whatever, and they're saying, oh, I'm not getting the support from the whatever, national Republic or state Republican Party or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, you should get the support if you're a decent candidate, I guess, but it just seems like they're carrying on with that same victim mindset that's not helping their situation and not really inspiring to other people looking at them.
Well, I mean, especially to black people on the outside looking in, if they're seeing that the Republican Party won't even support its black candidates, that's yet another indicator, right? That they shouldn't vote for them. I mean, here's the thing. I mean, some of these black candidates are real and they actually do want to make a difference. Others are running for clout. I'm not going to name names, but the thing is, their complaints are apt. I mean, when we talked last time, I told you, in cities like Chicago or Baltimore or DC or what have you, that Democrat machine is entrenched, and the local and state Democrat parties, they support their candidates and they're there in the communities. So you need a political machine to be able to defeat that. It's almost impossible to do it on your own. Now, in some cases, I will say that in some areas, the local GOPs will lend their support, or they'll at least try to do something. But by and large, they're not really doing much, especially in Chicago. I've talked to some candidates who've run in Chicago, and they're telling me that their GOP is completely inept. I mean, you talk about rhinos. I mean, that's what you're dealing with. They're trying to build an infrastructure outside of their Republican Party because they know that they're never going to get that support. But I will say that from the RNC, the National Republican Party, the ones that are below that at the state and local levels, they do take their cues from the top. So it's a top-down problem as well. And if we're really serious about this, if we want to win minority voters, which, by the way, if we don't, the conservative movement is going to be irrelevant in a few decades, then they have to start pouring in some resources and look at it as a long game. Because the Democrats are great at the long game. And I can explain that if you want me to, but Democrats are great at the long game. Republicans tend to be more short-term thinkers with this stuff, and they think that the way they've been doing it is going to keep working. We need to change that thinking, because if we don't, we will be a socialist nation. It's that serious.
Yeah. I mean, that's that demographic replacement of whites. And so then wouldn't you agree that this attack on whites and this is bad for blacks? Since you support conservatism and you think that's the best thing for blacks and for people, it's just right. don't you agree that loving whites rather than hating them is the best thing for black Americans?
Well, yeah. I mean, why do you think that white progressives want black people to hate white conservatives?
Yeah.
I mean, that's part of the scheme.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you this right now: most black people don't hate white people. I mean, if you talk to a regular rank and file black person, they don't hate white. Even if they believe that a lot of white people are racist, they know that most are not. So don't be fooled by what you're seeing in the media, whether it's right-wing media or left-wing media, because they both portray the same way. But yeah, they do want us at each other's throats. And unfortunately, on the right, we always fall for the trap, because when the white progressives start demonizing white conservatives, who does the right go after? They go after black men. I mean, that's just the way it is. And in making their point to counter that narrative, they tend to go overboard to the point to where they're demonizing black men in response. And that's the trap that they fall into, because thereby they're giving the left even more ammo to use against white conservatives. It's a mess.
Yeah.
I think it's what happens when we get so focused on what the left is doing. I'm not saying we don't need to call it out. I'm just saying we should form our own opinions. It's almost like we'll put an issue in front of us and say, what do you think about this issue? And we'll look, well, what does the left say about it? Oh, that's what they say. Okay, I'm gonna take the polar opposite and not even form my own opinion. Like it's ridiculous. The left controls a lot of what we think.
Yeah.
And just like Trump, he actually made them do that, because every opinion that they had was based on what Trump thought.
Right.
But now he's out, and we're doing the same thing with the left. We need to take a look at these issues, be the adults in the room. Acknowledging issues of race is not going to turn us into Al Sharpton. I promise. If you acknowledge that there's a certain amount of racism that exists, or that there are racial disparities, you're not going to turn into AOC. I promise. You can acknowledge those things without going crazy, without pretending like the KKK is waiting behind every tree to lynch a black person. We need to be the ones to have these conversations and be honest about it, because honestly, I think that's what black people want.
Do you agree that since you believe that racism is real, that whites are the least racist of all the people in America, statistically speaking, per capita, if you will?
Per capita.
In your common experience, let's say, or whatever.
In my common experience, I can't say anybody's the least racist, because I think most people in general are not racist. At least not full-on racist. I mean, we all have prejudices, right?
Well, you said last time you said we are tribalistic people. Human beings are tribal, but some of that tribalness is being called racist, or common sense, or stuff that people have the right to do, or just telling the truth usually is being called racist now.
Well, yeah, but you have to consider the source. Who's saying it? They call everybody racist. So, and that's why I say instead
everybody
of just
white.
Well, yeah.
Telling the truth.
Yeah, well, yeah. But that's what I'm saying. Like, instead of just reacting to what they're doing, why don't we form our own opinions on racial issues? I mean, I know you believe that racism doesn't exist. You have a different definition. It's evil or what have you. But are you afraid to address the evil that happens without exaggerating it like the left does, or without exploiting it like the left does? Because the hard left, they love racism. They love bigotry. They love it because it's a weapon. They love bigotry like a cowboy loves his gun. That's what they use it for. So since we know that, why can't we have more honest conversations about it that don't involve saying, "Oh, well, nobody's racist"? I mean, we have an opportunity here, and we're not taking it, and we need to.
You said that most blacks don't hate white people. And I agree that most people will get along with each other, because most people are they won't naturally want to get along. But when push comes to shove, or when these sensitive issues like the Chauvin case and stuff like that, when those come up, you see a completely different view of, I just remember 8 years ago, 9 years ago, when the Trayvon Martin case hit, the surveys showed blacks saw it completely different from non-blacks, saw that case completely different from non-blacks, because they had in my opinion, because they had a prejudice, and they've had this brainwashing of racism that no other people are subjected to as much as blacks are. So they have this temptation built into their system to prejudge a situation as being racist or whatever when they really don't know the situation. So I think that blacks do, I think all human beings have hatred in their heart. And I think that blacks do have this brainwashing to blame whites for situations that whites are not really to blame for.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it brainwashing. I don't think anybody's brainwashed. I think, well, I won't say
conditioning,
anything.
because people are people are taught to believe in racism. Blacks are taught to believe in racism from childhood. Go on. I interrupted you.
Well, and that's the thing. And I grew up as a black child and as a black adult. I was taught that racism does exist, but I was always able to say, well, it exists here. It doesn't exist here. It doesn't exist here. It exists here, that kind of thing. I mean, the bottom line is there are black people who think everything is racist. I've met them. I've interacted with them. I've been friends with some of them. But the vast majority don't see racism in every single situation. Black people have experienced way more racism in this country than most other races. So yeah, I mean, we know that history. We are very much in touch with that history and how it relates to today.
But they overplay that history. Anyway.
I don't think most black people overplay it. I do believe that the media does.
Yeah, it's overplayed to them.
Yeah, it is. And some buy it and some don't. I mean, because like I said, most black people have a lot of white friends. I mean, and they interact with white people on a daily basis. They don't hate white people. But when it comes to issues of race, there may be disagreements. I mean, Trayvon Martin might be one case. There might be another case. I mean, I'm seeing black Democrats come out and defend the officer who shot Ma'Khia Bryant. So it's not as cut and dry as the media would have it seem. And I'm talking about media on both sides because they both have a vested interest in sensationalizing things. They have a vested interest in exaggerating things to the point to where we are going to be at each other's throats. I mean, and it's a lot of people see it as right and left, and that is an element, but a lot of it is the elites against the rest of us. And who are the ones in the media? The elites. So they have a vested interest in having us at each other's throats.
You know, there's a lot of black conservatives who are used by fellow so-called conservatives as tokens. And that's true. That is fact. I totally believe that. Mm-hmm. But don't you agree that all black Democrats are tokens? Like they're just used as tokens like crazy. It's just they have a ton of them. They have all the tokens almost.
I wouldn't say used as tokens. I would say used as pawns. Yeah. But I mean, you do have token blacks in the Democratic Party, the ones who, they like to call us tap dancers. Well, they tap dance for Biden. They tap dance for the white progressives. Those people do exist, especially, in the media, politicians. So yeah, they tokenize black people too. They just don't really get called out for it. Although I will say that there are some on the left who will call this out, but you don't hear about them that much. I mean, you're not going to hear, they don't have the microphone, so to speak.
Do you agree that it's lame for, this is a side note, do you agree that it's lame for these journalists to capitalize the B all of a sudden in the word black for when they're referring to black Americans? Have you noticed that?
First of all, no. We need to stop using the word journalists. These people are not journalists. They're activists. I call them the activist media. I call them media activists. And yeah, it is kind of ridiculous. Yeah. I mean, if they capitalize, black and white, fine, I don't care. But I mean, if they're making a point to capitalize black and acting like that's ending racism, but that's what they do, James. This is what these people do. It's just like, last summer when George Floyd went down, what did the Democrats do? They painted murals. They painted murals on the street. Oh yeah, that's going to end racism. The global Black Lives Matter movement. I'm not talking about the local chapters. I'm talking about the global Black Lives Matter movement. What the hell have they done as far as influencing policy in a way that would hold officers accountable? Nothing, because they don't want to solve the problem. They don't care. Yeah. I have some super chats and some calls to get to, and I do have more questions for you. We're at the top of the hour. I hope I can keep. Just let me know as if you need to go. No, that's good. I blocked out time.
Cool. Appreciate that. So the first one, Asmodor over in Trovo. I'm streaming on multiple platforms. He says, if blacks aren't more racist, then why, according to the FBI, is a black person 27 times more likely to attack a white person than vice versa? You familiar with the black on white crime disparity?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and a lot of that is demographics. I mean, there are far more white people than black people. The vast majority of crime, though, is within the race. So the most amount of black crime is done against black people. The most amount of white victims are beaten up or killed by other white people. So here's the thing. You have to look at.
So you're saying it's
look at the numbers. So here's the thing. Black people beat up white people more than white people beat up black people. It's also true that black people are also the highest number of hate crime victims. It's also true that the black people who beat up white people or beat up other black people represent a minuscule percentage of the entire black population. So the vast majority of black people aren't beating anybody up. But people use this to say, oh, this is somehow a reflection of black culture or the black community. No, it's not. If it's fewer than 1% of us doing it, then you can't say it's black culture. You might have a different name for that culture. You can say, I don't know, gang culture or whatever culture you want to say, but it's not black culture, because if it was, there would be a huge percentage of us doing these things.
But so your answer to the disparity in black on white crime being way out of proportion compared to white on black crime is there's more whites to attack?
That could be it. And the thing is that there are a lot of things that could explain that, but it's not a reflection of the black community in general.
Okay,
it's not representative of an attitude in Black America where we're like, yeah, we need to go out and beat up white people. These are a very small group of people.
But that comes from something from the larger culture frequently.
No, because if that was the case, there would be more of us beating up white people in the streets.
Not necessarily. Mass shootings motivated by hatred of Jews or hatred of the immigrants or whatever, or blacks committing a crime based on the whites are whatever, the knockout game and all that stuff. Right. That's a reflection that they're getting their views and if it's motivated at all by this race thing or whatever, they're getting that from the larger culture. I'm not saying that you guys are all doing it, but they're getting it from the larger culture.
Well, then I would ask this. I mean, most school shooters are white. Does that mean that they're getting something from the white community or the white culture?
They're getting something from the larger culture, for sure.
That's an interesting question. I mean, I'm glad you're being consistent with that, but I would wonder what it is they're getting, because I don't see it as a racial culture that they're getting it from. Maybe it's just something overall in American culture.
Don't you think that blacks have a pretty racial culture? They have the most racial culture of all the cultures in America, I think.
Well, but that's the thing.
Like, they're the most race-focused people in America.
But that's the thing. I don't see that.
To their own detriment.
Yeah, but I'm not saying that the white or the most white people or white culture, or if you want to call it that, are giving messages to these young men who shoot up massage parlors and stuff like that. And I don't see that the larger black community is giving a message to black people who act like thugs, basically. I'd say that's more thug culture. I don't see that the black community is saying, yes, this is a good thing. I think that these people are acting of their own volition. They have chosen to take what they've heard and use it to justify what they're doing. I mean, I can say, I can say, I'm against illegal immigration. Now, if you go out and shoot illegal immigrants because I said that, that's not my fault, that's your fault. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I mean, because you can say things that you can.
I know, but I know, but I mean, I'm not playing the game where, you're like, Trump's rhetoric is responsible for this thing happening. Yeah, I'm not falling for that. But it is when you're pushing a lie, an outright lie, that, whites are racist and we need to go polar bear hunting or whatever they're calling it, right? Knockout game stuff. Because, like, blacks are killing, it's not just a rare mass shooting. Because the mass shootings, I don't know, blacks are committing as many mass shootings, but just not at schools. Not going into the gun-free zones. They're not as, I don't know, maybe they are cowards too, but like, when you look at the murders, the black on white murders, there's like 500 of them a year. And then there's like less than 250 of white on black murders. I know that it seems like there's more potential white perpetrators too. Like, why would it, anyway, what a mess. It seems like the answer is...
That it is a good question, though. I mean, that's making me want to look into that. I mean, to see the reasons why. It's an interesting question.
I have a couple of more super chats. Hydro says on streamlabs.com/The Hake Report, in a criminal case, the prosecution bears the burden of proving the defendant is guilty beyond all reasonable doubt. Interesting. Thank you, Hydro. True. Hydro says, never argue with low IQ people. They will drag you down to their level and beat you with experience. Arguing. Okay, well, thank you, guys. I will read more of your super chats. I want to get to a call or two before I get on. I do want to talk about infighting amongst blacks and the spiritual problem. I think it's a spirit. Are you a Christian?
Yeah.
I think it's a spiritual problem that is infecting America and blacks. And, oh, by the way, you said, before I get to the calls, you talked about the attack on men and the attack on black men. Do you agree that we shouldn't be calling black women queens? That's a joke, right? To call black women queens?
I call black women queens.
What?
I love it. But I will say this. I mean,
why?
I got white female friends, and I'll call them queens too.
But why do you call women queens?
I love black women. You know, it's a cultural thing, right? I mean, that's all it is. I mean, there's nothing harmful about it. It's just something that we do.
But it can be harmful.
Just like people call each other sister and brother. That's just what we do.
Yeah, that's I know. Black mothers are more directly responsible for this black youth crime than the black men.
How so?
Because they're the single mothers who are raising these children.
You know, I think that's really reductionist. I'm not going to say there aren't bad.
But when it comes down to it, they're more directly responsible. They're both responsible because one has to be, but directly responsible for it. They're giving an attitude that's not talked about.
What's the attitude
to the kids? To these kids, the kids that are getting this attitude from somewhere. It's from the black mothers.
What are the black mothers teaching them?
Anger.
Why do you think that?
Because look at how angry and out of control so many of these black kids are. We're seeing it all over in viral videos all over the place.
Maybe their anger doesn't have anything to do. I mean, I was raised by a single mother. I'm not angry.
I know. But there's exceptions to the rules. But you think these are coming from two-parent homes?
I think the fact that their homes are broken up and a lot of times the father isn't involved. I don't think that this is as widespread as we say it is on the right, but that does happen. It happened to me. And I think that feeds into a lot of the anger. I think the conditions in which they live feed into a lot of the anger. I think that there's a lot of stuff that figures into it. I think that it's such that even in a lot of cases, if the single mother is doing the best that they can, which I believe most are, they can still have this anger. I mean, and the society in which they live, which, by the way, a lot of this was done by Democrats. Most of it was. I think that also figures into it as well. I mean, when you don't have economic opportunities, when the education system in your city sucks and you don't have the choice to go to a better school, you don't have the opportunity. I mean, there's no way to deny that all plays a role. If those issues were taken care of and these single mothers were doing the best they could, then I think that it's more likely that they're going to turn out without having that level of anger. I'm not saying that would solve everything, but at the same time, if there are certain conditions that the government deliberately created, then it doesn't make sense to just blame the single mother, because most single mothers are doing the best they can, and they're good mothers.
I don't know, man. It seems like there's a hesitancy among most people, including you, I think, to criticize women, single mothers, because it's not politically correct or something, or some type of...
I'll criticize them when it's necessary. I mean, the mother of that 13-year-old kid who was out at 2:30 in the morning, yeah, horrible parenting. Like, I don't know if she was black or white or Hispanic,
I think.
I mean, but that's the thing. If you give me like an individual case, then I can judge it that way. But I'm not going to make a blanket statement and say just in blanket black single mothers are directly responsible for what's happening here.
But I think I mean, I know that I recognize that the larger culture and Democrats and media all play a negative influence on people, but parents can be a huge stopper to that, huge stopper to to that, and I don't think it's not. It's a disservice to excuse it and say, oh, it's Democrats' fault, or oh, it's the failing schools and stuff. Yeah, I mean, those are not helping.
I'm saying it's all of it.
I know, but
because keep in mind, if you're a white kid and you grew up, and if you happen to grow up in one of these cities next to black people, and your white single mother is there too, very good chance you're going to end up the same way. It happens all the time.
Well, I'm not saying that's not happening. Look at Dylan Roof. He had a messed up family situation. He had black friends, and then he saw this lie from the media about white racism, and then he looked up the black on white crime and saw, hey, this isn't. They're not telling me the truth, and he got mad and wanted to start a race war. And that's that messed up family situation that's going on. Anyway, I got to get to some calls, unless you have a follow-up to that.
No, I'm good.
Let me get to my second favorite caller, been on hold forever. Earl in Michigan wants to comment on this Chauvin case. Earl, how are you doing?
Hola.
Hey.
Buenos dias.
Morning.
James Hake.
Afternoon.
And their guest, Jeff.
Jeff Charles. Jeff on the right on Twitter.
I just said that, Jeff Charles.
Yep. Nice.
I have a couple of questions. One doesn't pertain to what you're talking about right now, and the other one does.
Go for it.
Hey, Jeff.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm with you.
Do you believe that blacks were created for evil, and that they did have no positive influence in society since they've been here? And are you one of the ones that were created for evil? You and your family, your relatives, and everybody else that is preached on this station.
Wait.
Turn up Earl louder.
Yeah. You're asking, is what created for evil?
Black folks.
Black folks.
That is preached on this station religiously. How blacks are created for evil, and they don't have any positive influence on America at all. They do nothing for it. They are the problem, and so on, so on, so on. So I'm asking you, based on that assumption.
No, that's a lot of crap. Black people weren't created for evil.
Are you created for evil and your family and all your relatives?
He said no, Earl. He said that's a load of crap.
Yeah, I thought so. But y'all don't believe it when I tell you that. But the other question, by the way, Hank, on the Chauvin situation, it is established that the knee on the neck was a way of getting someone into handcuffs. It wasn't meant to hold persons in the prone position for any length of time with their hands strapped behind their back.
Gotcha.
It was known for 30 years.
All right.
30 years by police force, the danger of positional asphyxiation.
Gotcha.
Jeff, you mentioned about the Republican Party and so forth. Isn't it true that you touched on a little bit that the blacks didn't abandon the Republican Party? The Republican Party abandoned the blacks in search of more votes and attention for whites by let's say going for you mentioned Goldwater and his extremist views and the John Birch Society and so forth. So they try to court white folks, with the, what do you call it, the Southern strategy. Are you familiar with that?
Yes, I am. And it's funny, people think that the Southern strategy started in the 60s. It actually started, like I said, shortly after Reconstruction with the Lily White movement. And the thing about that, and I don't necessarily buy the left's narrative on the Southern strategy, but there was a Southern strategy. And after Reconstruction, what happened is that there were a lot of Republicans who wanted to become more of a national party. So they wanted to win votes in the South. But the problem is that they were being labeled as the party of the Negro, right? And rightly so, because they were very close with the Black community. So the Southern Democrats would tell their white voters, don't vote for them. They like Black people. So they had to try to shed that image. And the Lily White movement is what helped them do that. So that went on. And then under Eisenhower, we had more of a resurgence of the Republican Party trying to win back Black votes. But then by the time Goldwater came around, he put the knife in the back of GOP Black outreach. And then you had Nixon, who went along with the Southern strategy, although when he took office, he didn't exactly do for the white Southerners what he said he was going to do, which leads me to believe that he was putting him on so he can get elected. Because when he got elected, one of the first things he did was build a commission specifically for minority businesses to help Black business owners. So Nixon is a mixed bag, but still, the overall point is right. It was the Republican Party that left the Black community, not the other way around. They pushed them out.
Thank you, Earl. I got to run. We'll talk again.
I got one little small thing I wanted
Hurry
to
up.
say.
Do it.
I have a little saying that the Democratic Party will visit Blacks and so forth. The Republicans, you have to make an appointment. So that's the difference between the accessibility with the Democrats and who reaches out to
That's
who.
your excuse for supporting abortion, Earl?
No, that's not my excuse. Adios, amigos.
All right, adios. Nice talking with you, Earl. He's
I might have to steal that one.
Bobby in Texas wants to comment on this Ashli Babbitt thing. He's been on hold forever. What's up, Bobby?
Oh, not much, James. How you doing, bud?
Fine, thank you.
All right. So, well, first off, I wanted to talk about the election recount, the audit in Arizona.
Oh, well, you have anything
opinion.
for Jeff, or you want to hold?
I actually, put me on hold.
Put you on hold. Okay, thanks, man. Nice to hear from you. I gotta get to Kraig in Illinois. He wants to comment on this Chauvin case. Kraig, what's up?
Hey, what's going on, Hake?
Good to hear from you.
Hey, what's going on, Jeff?
Hey, how you doing?
All right. Hey, man. I just wanted, I was, let's see, I was monitoring the Chauvin case last week, and I do have law enforcement experiences, and there were some gray areas in that incident with Officer Chauvin, but by looking at the toxicology report, and you didn't mention that, with the 11 nanograms of fentanyl, and he had meth in his system. And when they pulled him out the car, now there were some things I wouldn't have done when I was there, but if you can hear in George Floyd's voice that he was ODing, I think it should have been handled a different way. Would he have known that he had all that much drugs in his system? Because that technique, which is a prone position, okay, that knee did not kill him. And that in the toxicology report, there was no sign of suffocation on his neck. So I just want to know, because like I said, I respect your opinion and everything, but, yeah, it looks bad because it's on camera and there's a Photoshop of Chauvin.
Yeah.
But, in fairness, these people were very biased towards him, and plus the jury was getting intimidated by Maxine Waters. You didn't mention that.
Not to mention the whole mainstream media. They lynched him for a whole year. Well, 6 months.
And they attacked this man because he's white. And yes, I am black, and I see it myself coming from black folks, that I'm seeing a lot of black folks taking their anger and frustration out on the Caucasian race. And that's not cool. That does right there make other races don't like us. And good guys like myself and other blacks have to suffer because of that. Okay? This man did not kill that George Floyd. Them drugs that he took that was in his system killed him. But
Okay.
they don't want to hear that. It doesn't fit their agenda. They want to hang this man because because he's white. Now, if it was a black man on trial and he did that to George Floyd, it wouldn't be no outcome, no outcry. So I want you to know, can you explain to me, why is it like that? I mean, it's just so mixed up to me. It don't make logical sense. It's very hypocritical that some people can go out there and go celebrate a man going to jail, but when you got these kids on the streets getting shot, there's no outcry, there's no protesting, there's no celebrating when the killer's called. Can you help me with that?
Go for it, Jeff.
Yeah, there was a lot there, so I'm going to try to remember everything. But I understand what you're saying about the toxicology report. Look, the bottom line is that the Hennepin County Medical Examiner ruled that George Floyd's death was a homicide and not an overdose. They didn't know, the medical examiner didn't note the amount of drugs that he had in his system. The meth, I mean, they talk about the meth, but the meth was at low levels, and we found that out during the trial. It was the fentanyl that was the issue.
You said the examiner did or did not note the toxic.
He did.
It was in there.
The drugs.
All right.
So, but like I was saying, it was shown in the trial that a lot of people who had that same level of fentanyl in their system, they end up surviving. And it's really a case-by-case basis. It really depends on your tolerance. If you have worked up a tolerance, which George Floyd was using fentanyl because he had a back injury a while ago and he got addicted, just like, a lot of others did. Rush Limbaugh's one with Oxycontin or whatever it was. This happens to people. And so he could have already built up a tolerance to it. And George Floyd was a big dude. He was 6'6". So there was no way that you can convince me that he was going to die at that moment, no matter what. The Hennepin County Medical Examiner found that the knee on the neck caused the death. Now, I understand that there weren't marks on his neck or things like that, but the pulmonologist in the trial explained that he was making it harder for George Floyd to breathe. And as time went on, he couldn't inhale enough to even say anything. Like remember, he was saying, "I can't breathe." Well, after a while, he stopped saying it because he couldn't, because of the knee on the neck.
No, there was the drugs in the system. I disagree with you because it takes 3 nanograms. It takes 3 nanograms to kill you. Okay, all right. He had 11 in his system. That's enough to kill a horse.
If that were true, then everybody who had that amount of drugs in their system would be dead, and that's not true.
Had he not?
Did you graduate? You graduate, dude, because you come up here talking that bullshit. You don't know what you're talking about.
Keep it clean, Kraig. Appreciate it, man. Keep it cool, Kraig. Had he not been on those drugs, would that knee have killed him, do you think?
According to the trial, it would have. And here's the thing, I'm not saying that the drugs didn't have anything to do with it. They may have had something to do with it. But the bottom line is that without the knee on the neck.
Let's move on to the other points.
I want to talk to this guy. I talk to you later. Thank you.
Thank you, Kraig. But you can still answer the other points that he was saying. He said that was the one thing. I think the other point was
the answer. So I mean, I'll address what he said about.
No, he's still listening.
Other black people. So they say, the media does ignore it when black people kill black people. And by the way, this wasn't a racist thing. Chauvin wasn't convicted because of his race. Come on now. Everybody knows that most white police officers, when they commit a crime like that, they don't get punished for it. So if that were the case, we wouldn't even be having this conversation, because most officers who commit those kind of crimes would be in jail. The fact of the matter is that doesn't happen. So that was a load of crap.
Wait, you're saying that cops are getting away with crimes?
Yeah, I mean, if a police officer is accused,
I'm still not even convinced that he committed a crime, to be honest.
Well, either way, I mean, it is very unlikely that a cop ever gets held accountable when they do something wrong.
For a killing, because most of those killings are justified.
No, I'm talking about the ones that aren't justified. I mean, killings or beatings or excessive force. I mean, Chauvin had 17 complaints against him.
That's irrelevant. People complain. In Minneapolis, people complain.
For good reason.
In Murderopolis, it's Murderopolis. It's hell over there. And a lot of people complain. That's not evidence that he did wrong.
Then the complaint is relevant. And I think like 8 of them were for excessive force, and nothing happened. If they had done something about it then, George Floyd would still be alive, and you know what? Chauvin wouldn't be in jail. So that's what I'm saying. They don't. Police officers rarely get punished, even when they're found to have planted evidence, things like that. They might get.
But when it's against a black, the lynch mob goes nuts.
No, they don't.
Yeah, it is when all of this hype goes on. Yes, they do. If they can get media attention,
fewer
they're
than
gonna
30% of police officers are ever taken to court or tried for a crime. Of the ones who are tried, fewer than 30% actually get convicted. Of the ones who are convicted, fewer than 30% of them actually see jail time.
Because they're mostly
there is an
petty
issue here.
complaints.
If this was because America is racist against white cops, that would not be the case.
No, because
the numbers don't bear you out.
Most of this is petty complaints.
Getting beaten up by a government official, yeah, that's not petty. If it happened to you, you wouldn't think it was petty.
I know, but there's a whole lot of people giving petty complaints, and you know it.
Like what?
I don't know, but it happens.
Yeah, I'm sure it happens.
Blacks are constantly crying racism over any little thing. They make a disturbance, and they're saying, "Oh, you did this because I'm racist."
Aren't for racism. If you're lodging a complaint against an officer, you're not saying I don't like this guy because.
But it's another word for it.
He beat the crap out of me when I wasn't resisting, or he planted evidence, or whatever. I mean, that's what these complaints are. Yeah, I'm sure there's some petty complaints out there, and I'm sure that some are even lying. But when you have 17 complaints against you, or
it's not evidence.
All these complaints going on.
That's like that's like saying Bill Cosby's guilty because there's 50 or 60 complaints against him. Accusations and complaints are not evidence. I reject all that stuff. Maybe he was, but I don't. That's not evidence to me.
Yeah, but to me, if you have all these complaints, and I'm not just talking about Chauvin, I'm just talking about in general.
Same here.
If people bring charges against an officer, the officer is going to get off. That's just how it happens. Even prosecutors.
That's because they need evidence.
Grand juries in a way that gets the officer off. It's been clear. They have. I mean, when we're talking about qualified immunity, an officer can use that to get off. And a lot of times, even when they're fired, they can just find work at another police department. So yeah, police officers are allowed to do things that you and I wouldn't be able to do without getting punished. And that's a problem. And that puts a lie to the idea that Chauvin was convicted because of his race. Because if that were true, then most white police officers, when they go to court, when they get charged with crimes, they wouldn't get off.
No, that's not true, because there's not all this media attention on all these white officers, so there's not as much pressure. It was politics why a lot of these guys are.
If we were against white people, then it would get more media attention.
This brings me to my Jesse Lee Peterson says that blacks are cursed, and I've heard Tommy Sotomayor and others wonder whether blacks are cursed because of all these things going wrong. It's kind of like my show at the beginning. Whatever could go wrong does go wrong. Some of it's their own dumb fault. Some of it is neglect of justice, let's say. Let's say it does happen with the police sometimes, right? A lot of times. But there's this disproportionate hatred of cops and of whites and one another, honestly. They don't love each other. Even black conservatives are infighting like crazy. And actually, everybody's infighting in America right now. Especially like on the right, because we lost.
Well, arguing doesn't mean hate, though. I mean, because you argue with somebody who you disagree
with.
But
I'm talking about infighting. I'm not talking about just disagreeing. I'm talking about infighting and backbiting, envy, backstabbers, jealousy. And I think
sounds like
that
a human condition.
It is, but it's affecting blacks the most.
Is it?
Yeah. Look at the family situation, the crime situation. It's affecting blacks the most. It's like on fire, and you know that. So black people are cursed, right? Okay, so there are about 45 million black people in the country today. How many of them, what percentage do you think are in jail? I don't know. I have no idea.
I mean, when you're talking
that's one symptom. Jail is just one symptom. You feel cursed sometimes. I bet. there's a whole lot of curse before you get to jail.
That's just one aspect.
Exactly.
You realize that the vast majority of black Americans are not poor, right? You do know.
Yeah, I know that. But that's my situation.
That black wages are going up. You do know that black women are graduating college.
That's not a positive thing. And all this.
I mean, but if it allows them to start a business, then that is a positive.
All Americans are probably richer today than and more spoiled, I would add, than any other time in history, including blacks. And some say that's
cursed. That can't be true of us.
Yes, it can, because all this
things don't get better for you when you're cursed.
That's not better for you, because it's not better for you. Morally, all Americans are at a low point.
There might be truth to that. I mean, that goes back to what you were saying about there being a spiritual issue.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
The part that is silly to me is when you say, "Oh, this is about black people more than others." It's not.
Well, it's undeniable that it's affecting blacks more than others. 95% voting for Democrats, whether it's Republicans' fault or not. That's a curse.
Yeah, that's not a good
out of
thing.
control
But that's
abortion
not-
and
that's not
crime
a
and all that
curse.
stuff. That's a
not
curse.
That's the Republican Party making stupid decisions.
I know, but to the
I mean, things can happen. Things can happen because of your own fault and because of external factors.
Right.
Both play a part.
and it's both part of the
Because
curse.
things are happening doesn't mean that it was a curse. I mean, were black people in slavery because they were cursed, or was
No,
it because
slavery was-
white people did
they were
some really
doing-
evil stuff?
I respect the slaves. They were those of them that were dignified. I totally respect that. There's something wrong in the last
You like the dignified
100 years.
slave. Okay.
For sure. You don't respect the slaves and the slave owners? Many of them were dignified people.
Wait, does respect the slave owners?
Yeah, them too.
No.
They
No,
taught
you
them
can't own another
Christianity
human
and all that
being
stuff.
And be dignified, James.
What's that?
You can't own another human being and be dignified.
Yeah,
I
you
mean,
can. Look at some of the founding fathers owned so-called fellow human being. So I say so-called owned fellow human beings,
like
but
what
they were
did.
dignified
The fact
men.
that They owned slaves.
What's that? They were dignified men. They were better than most of us.
Men.
Huh?
They were flawed men.
But they were dignified men.
There's nothing dignified about owning another human being.
I know, but they're dignified men regardless, whether they owned them or not. It was the reality of life. There's nothing dignified about abortion. That's way worse. And there's nothing dignified about how these people having sex out of wedlock. That's the norm now. And that stuff those are actual sins. Or whatever. Actual
Yeah, and
outright
owning
wrongs.
people is also a sin too.
What's that?
Owning other people is also a sin.
No,
too.
it's not. It's not ideal. I'm not for it. But it's not a sin. It's not outlined again, specifically recommended against.
By what happened in America before 1865.
Treat your slaves well. Masters, treat your slaves well. Slaves, treat your masters well. If you
And
can
you don't
get
know
your
the
freedom, do so. If you can get your freedom, do so. But don't let it
You don't know the
keep you
difference
down.
between those slaves and the slaves that we have today.
What's that?
You don't know the difference between those slaves and the slaves that we have today. And by the way,
What slaves do we have today? The difference between
not today,
biblical slaves?
I mean, before 1865.
But even still.
although there is still slavery today, just not
Right.
Yeah.
But regardless, I'm talking about I think there's this blanket, everything was evil about it. I saw
Yeah,
that you're
everything
like,
about evil,
I quit.
Slavery was evil.
No, not everything was evil about it. I mean, you guys should be grateful to be here.
Do you think human traffickers are dignified who have slavery in America today?
No, not necessarily,
Why not?
because human trafficking is illegal.
Oh, so it's the legality. So if it were legal for slavery,
But you're not even trying to
then
understand.
it would be okay.
You're not even trying to understand my point. You're being obtuse because you well know that the founding fathers were dignified men. Or are you denying that?
I think that the ones who didn't own slaves were. I think that the ones who owned slaves did some good things. I like that they founded this country. I love this country. But I'm not going to look back and say, yeah, I mean, that guy who owned slaves was dignified. Now,
Have
I
you
know
done wrong in your life?
Yeah, sure.
Do you have like an ongoing wrong in your life that's ongoing? Not to get into it personally, but how can you say that these people weren't dignified and you're
Did
just
they
judging
repent?
them based on this slavery
Did they
thing?
repent of their slavery?
Huh?
Some did. Some did.
I know, but
So-
this was a reality of life. Oh man, it's ridiculous. I think you guys are
Abortion is a part
dramatic
of
about
American
it.
life. Does that mean it's a good thing? No, it's not a good thing.
But it's not necessarily a bad thing.
Abortion isn't a bad thing?
Abortion is bad. But I'm
Right.
talking about slavery.
Yeah, and slavery is a bad thing, especially
It can be. It's not ideal. There were happy slaves. Anyway,
Were they happy?
let's move on because we're at an impasse with this topic. I can't believe that you think that these were not dignified men. George Washington,
The ones who continue to support slavery.
General
no.
Lee. General Lee, didn't he eventually free them? He said that it's a moral and political evil, but he inherited from his father-in-law like dying. He
And
had
set it
to
up
he
where
had
they
to
would
deal
be
with
free after he died.
he had
That
to
was a
deal
good
with all
thing.
this stuff, and so he had to keep the slaves in order to keep the thing going. Like some of this stuff you can't exactly get out of.
A lot of the people who freed their slaves They still worked on that same plantation. They just got paid. It was by choice at that point. If it's by choice, then it's by choice.
Yeah, I like choice.
But Lee, he ended up freeing his slaves upon his death. That was a good thing. So I can say, if you supported slavery and then you changed your mind on it, fine. But if you're talking about the ones who were supporting slavery until their death, I'm sorry, I don't have much grace there. Even for Robert E. Lee, he wasn't as bad as some of the others. But I'm not going to be like, yeah, you stopped doing something that you knew you shouldn't have been doing in the first place.
But how are these people supposed to know that they shouldn't be doing it if they're born and raised in this culture where it's all accepted? Look at the stuff that we accept that's way worse.
Culture. There were always plenty of people pushing back against
I know,
slavery.
but a lot of these were Marxists. I heard that the Republican Party was heavily Marxist influenced, like Karl Marx. Was that? Yeah, well, not heavily.
That's a lie that the left will tell you.
Well, I heard that Karl Marx wrote to Abe Lincoln.
Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah, and that he was repeating stuff that he was saying.
Yeah, he wrote one letter to Abraham Lincoln. They were not friends. Abraham Lincoln was not a Marxist. And I don't agree with everything that Abraham Lincoln did, but that is a lie that progressives will tell you. They want you to think that the beginnings of the Republican Party were Marxist.
It's not just progressives saying this stuff. Some honest people I consider honest are saying this stuff. They're looking into this.
They're honest too. They're just wrong.
All right. Well,
I mean, Karl Marx and Abraham Lincoln were not best buds. I mean, that's been debunked.
Well, I wasn't saying they were. Okay. I got to get to some more calls. I hope that you're able to. I'm probably going to keep you through until the top of the hour. If that works for you. Okay. Appreciate it. Let's get to Zach in Columbus, Ohio. He's been on hold forever. Zach, it's good to hear from you. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Hake, how are you?
Fine, thank you.
First, I want to say to Jeff, how do you not believe that the Founding Fathers were dignified people, but you have an American hat on? Take that American hat off.
What is so American about slavery? I mean, we fought a war to end it. Now, not all the Founding Fathers owned slaves. I think a lot of them didn't, and a lot of them ended up changing their minds on it. Those people are dignified, but I'm not going to say that
George
every
Washington.
single one was dignified.
George Washington, dignified or not?
All of them were dignified. They were Founding Fathers.
I think in George Washington's time,
them,
somebody may want to check me on this, but I think in George Washington's time when he was alive, you couldn't actually free your slaves. If you did, they would just be caught by somebody else or they would be killed.
See?
So in that case, so if that's true,
He was a good master. Anyway.
You can't be a master of another human being and be good. But
Yeah,
here's the
you
thing:
can.
if that is
Yeah, you
actually
can.
true, then I don't see what else Washington could have done.
Jesse
If
Lee
it's not
Peterson is
true,
my master.
Freed slaves illegally and nothing would have happened to them, then no, that is an undignified part of him. Him fighting the Revolutionary War, that is dignified. But I'm not going to say that the whole
But
man.
the man. Anyway, okay. Anything else, Zach?
Yeah, the original question was, if you know about this LeBron James situation, I wanted to get your take on that.
Oh God, LeBron James. I wrote an article a while ago that would offend some of my readers, but I said LeBron James is a white progressive in political blackface, which is something that I say about the global Black Lives Matter movement as well. He's doing exactly what white progressives want him to do. He's fear-mongering. He may be sincere with what he's saying, but every time something like this happens, he uses his platform to fear-monger. And that's what pisses me off about him. I've seen him have some normal, nuanced conversations about this, but for the most part, he uses his platform to make it seem like Black people should just be afraid every single day, afraid of even stepping foot outside their house. The same thing happened with Ahmaud Arbery. That's what he exploits it.
Evil.
And with Ma'Khia Bryant, he had to delete that tweet because more facts came out showing that the officer was saving a Black life.
Yeah.
So he reacts emotionally. He says a lot of stupid shit, and I'm not a fan. If I watch basketball, I might be a fan of his basketball abilities, but
Right.
yeah, I'm not really a fan. I don't think that he's doing it on purpose, but he should know better.
Appreciate you, Zach.
Yep.
Anything else, man?
Yep, take that American flag hat off. You're not a real patriot. They were
Yeah, if I was a patient, I
dignified.
would support slavery.
No,
Yeah,
you should
okay.
you should tell him to I think he's more likely to cave and support the founders. We want
Maybe
him
you
to.
prefer the Confederate flag if I wore that.
It's a beautiful flag too. Thank you,
That's
Zach.
Confederate flag. I wish the South would have won. They were
I bet you do.
Thanks, Zach. Appreciate you, man. We'll talk.
Of course.
All right. I got to get to Skip in Augusta, Georgia. Been on hold forever. Skip, you're on with Jeff Charles at Jeff on the Right on Twitter.
Hey, how you doing?
Fine, thank you.
Look at here, before we get into this Chauvin thing, or whatever his name is.
Chauvin. Derek
How
Chauvin?
can you, yeah, Chauvin, or whatever. George Washington and the majority of the founding fathers were Freemasons. So how can you say they were really, really good men?
I don't know what the Freemasons were like back then. I hear that they're not good today. I don't know. I don't know much about the Freemason thing. You know anything about that? Have any comment, Jeff?
That is an interesting point. I don't know a whole lot about the Freemasons either, but I do know that a lot of our founding fathers were Freemasons, and you know it's alleged that the Freemasons got up to some stuff, but I don't know much about it.
You want to explain in brief what's bad with the Freemasons, in as brief as you can.
It'll take too long. That's for another show. Let me ask, I got a couple of questions for Jeff.
All right, go for it.
Jeff, I appreciate you. Jeff, I appreciate you being on here. You're making some good points. I disagree with some of them, but you are making some good points. Still, none the same. But let me ask you this: do you think that it was wrong for them to go ahead and it wasn't the criminal charges, but when they awarded his family, what was it, $27 million? The city did.
Oh yeah, for the George Floyd relatives.
Yeah.
George Floyd family. Yeah. Do you think that should have been held and come out and so we'd know about it before the trial, or should have been done afterwards? And do you think it could have influenced some of the jurors? And at the same time, do you think the jurors were afraid that if they did find him not guilty, that their city would burn again?
Those are good questions. For the settlement, I'm not convinced that it influenced the verdict, but I do think it was a bad idea. They probably should have held on to that until after the trial. It was definitely a bad look, and something that could be used on appeal, because they are going to appeal the case. Now, as for the threats of riots and things like that, I'm also not convinced that that is what influenced the jury. I know there was an alternate juror who came out and said that she was concerned about riots, but this was in answer to a question as to whether she wanted to serve on the jury. She did not say that influenced her opinion on Chauvin's guilt. As a matter of fact, she said the opposite. She said that she doesn't think that outside factors influence the verdict. But at the same time, it's possible. If later on some of these jurors come out and say, yeah, I only voted that way because of the riots, then I'll change my position. But right now, we don't have evidence that the jury was influenced by it. We just have evidence that it happened.
Anything else, Skip?
Hey, yeah, one more thing, Jeff. You were talking about how y'all was talking earlier about how and there is more black on white crimes than white on black crimes. Is the reason for that because it just happens to be so many more whites than there are blacks, or is it because the blacks are just meaner and go after the whites a whole lot more than whites go after the blacks?
Good question. Did you understand?
Yeah, that's a good question. I do think that part of it is the population. I mean, you're more likely to run into a white person than others, even in certain neighborhoods. But I think that this has to do with a culture that is not black culture, but I don't know what you call it. Some people call it gang culture, thug culture, or hood culture. I wouldn't call it hood culture, but maybe like thug culture, and that's just what they do. Now, I'm only speaking about this small amount of black people, because I have to reiterate that, because a lot of people will take that small number and make it sound like it's most black people, but I think it's just ignorance. It stems from ignorance. It stems from upbringing. It stems from the conditions that they're forced to live in because of government policy. Again, Democrats. But I think all of those things play into that. I think that let's say if it wasn't black people, and let's just stick Italians in there, because it used to be an Italian thing back in the day. People forget that. And I don't think that it would be indicative of Italian culture. I think it would just be this crime element that is present.
Skip.
Well, yeah. One more thing, Jeff, if I can.
Yeah.
You notice in Chicago and other major cities is all black on black crime that you're hearing about, but we never hear about big uproars of white on white crime in cities or anywhere really to come to talk about it. We don't hear about that, but there's so much focus on the black on black crime because there's so much of it happening. Why is that, you think?
Wait, say that last part again. I didn't hear you.
Why do you think there's more black on black crime, like in Chicago and other cities, than white on white crime? Mass shootings, or et cetera. Why come? Are they just focusing on the blacks, or is it because the real problem is the blacks?
Basically, he's asking, is this black on black crime a real thing? Because some people say black on black crime is not real.
Well, I mean, when they say that, they're saying that most violent crime is intraracial, right? A white victim is more likely to be killed by a white person, same with black. And that is a valid point. At the same time, I mean, if black people are making up most of the murder victims, then there should be something done about it. Again, I think a lot of this has to do with the condition. I mean, if you live in poor conditions, that poverty breeds crime. I mean, everybody knows that.
No, I don't agree with that.
But
correlation is not causation.
If you don't need to sell drugs, you're not going to sell drugs. 13% of 13% of the population, 50% of murders, right?
Okay, but okay.
Okay, but they commit the most of the murders and major crimes. Now, what's the reason for that then? Is it because there's too many white people out here?
He's saying poverty causes crime, which is a lie. That's an atheist lie. You're a Christian.
That has nothing to do with religion.
Yeah, it is. Because it has to do with
that's
a communist lie.
In the world that is that destitute. You have high rates of violent crime.
That's because
in wealthy areas,
you're begging the question.
Have a lot of crime because people don't need to commit those types of crimes.
But they don't need to commit most of the crimes that they're committing.
I'm not saying that they need to do it. I'm just saying they're more likely to do it.
I know, but that's a correlation. That's correlation, not causation. Okay.
You're more likely to steal a piece of bread.
To me, it just sounds like you're making excuses. It sounds like you're making excuses for the black people.
You're not letting me finish the last thing. When you let me finish, then you'll see that it's.
It does sound like he's making excuses, but let him finish.
Yeah. So.
Okay.
If you can't afford a loaf of bread and you're hungry, you're more likely to steal a piece of bread. Now, does that mean it's an excuse? No, because there are a lot of black people who grew up that way that end up making it out. That does not mean that the conditions that were specifically intended for black people that were done a while ago don't still have an impact. So two things can be true at once. People do have the responsibility to not commit crimes, but people are more likely to make those decisions when they're living under those conditions that were deliberate. And I think it's still deliberate. I mean, by Democrats, by the way, they are deliberately keeping a lot of black people in these situations. Not all, because again, most black people don't commit crimes and most black people are not poor. I mean, so the thing is we have to focus on what is happening here. So people do make those decisions, and they make those decisions because of what Democrats are doing. It doesn't justify it. It doesn't excuse it, but it largely explains it. So that's why there's a lot of black on black crime. And by the way, there are a lot of black people pushing back against that. I mean, the other caller made the statement that nobody cares about black on black crime. That's a lie, because the media doesn't cover the steps that a lot of black organizations are taking to curb gang violence and to get drugs out of the community and what have you. I've written about them. There are tons of them, but you'll never hear about it from Fox News. You'll never hear about it from CNN because they don't want you to know what's happening.
Thank you, Skip.
Well, you're right. You're right. Wait a minute. You're right about that, Jeff. The media is setting the narrative about just defunding the police. And if you actually look at the polls that's been done, or the people that's been asked questions, blacks and whites majority do not want to defund the police.
You are absolutely right, and that's why. And I'm just going to put this in here really quick. Anybody who advocates for defunding the police, at least in a way that would result in fewer officers in black neighborhoods, they are supporting a white supremacist proposition, because that means that there's going to be more crime, more black people killing each other. And honestly, I think that's what they want.
Thank you,
Look
Skip.
here, thanks, Hake. I appreciate it. And Jeff, I'm enjoying you being on there and come again. All right, enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, man. I have at least 2 more callers I really want to get to, but I gotta say, like, I think that immorality causes poverty and crime. Not poverty causes crime. Immorality on the part of the government, yes, but also on the part of we the people. We have to be responsible for ourselves and be willing to blame, victim blame. We have to victim blame in order for the victims to not be to know how not to be victimized again.
I would rather stand aside a victim and do what needs to be done to remove the obstacles from them getting to where they need to be. But where I agree with you as far as crime goes, in wealthy areas, you don't have a lot of violent crime, but
nor in Appalachia.
But where does a lot of the white collar crime occur? That's by wealthy people, right? So I'm not saying that crimes aren't committed.
I know. Yeah.
A lot in the rich communities. I'm just talking about the nature of crime. When we're talking about violent crime.
But Appalachia is poor, and they don't have this crazy crime rate.
Wait, say it again?
The Appalachian Mountains and all that, where they have the poorest white communities, they're not so ridden with, I mean, maybe they have opioid overdoses or something. I don't know.
They do have a lot of crime in that. But again, the crime may be different, but I mean, they do have a lot of violent crime in the Appalachians and in poor white areas. And white people who live in the hood, they commit crimes too.
I know. Yeah, so, I'm not saying that it's not spiritual. I think it's spiritual. Man, I got to get to Wesley in PA, a first-time caller. He wants to comment on this "there's more work to be done" talk. Have you heard that stuff before, Jeff?
Wait, are you talking about with police brutality?
Everybody talking about more work to be done after the Derek Chauvin thing. I don't know if you watched Tucker or if you saw Michael Tracy's article documenting all these CEOs and university presidents and Tim Scott, who I consider a total rhino, and Democrats all talking about there's more work to be done to fight against, I don't know, police brutality or racism or something. I don't know if you've seen that. Okay, Wesley. Wesley in PA. We'll go for it.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, first I just wanted to say real quick with your host, the poverty does not breed crime. The poorest communities in America are in and around New York City, and they're Orthodox Jewish communities, and they have some of the lowest crime rates in the world. So the fact that if poverty breeds crime, these would be some of the most crime-riddled neighborhoods because the men don't go to work. They spend most of their day studying the Bible and stuff.
Thank you.
And all the families are on welfare. They make less than $30K and they have 10, 12 children.
If that's true, and I'm going to look into that. If that's true, the exception does not disprove the rule. I mean, I'm talking about overall. Yeah, I'm sure there are poor communities where the crime rate isn't high. But in general, as a rule, that's what happens.
But crime causes the poverty. Crime.
You're right. It's cyclical.
Yeah.
It's cyclical.
If you have a lot of crime, you can't have who's going to want to open a business in a crime-riddled area?
You are right. You are 100% right about that.
Oh, so you wanted to comment on this more work to be done stuff?
So you posted this article yesterday. I appreciate you doing that.
Yeah.
And so I started reading it. And I was like, holy crap. And I did some more research. And I was looking up, companies that are funding Black Lives Matter and posting Black Lives Matter on their website. And I was like thinking, and I want to see what you guys think about this because your host is conservative, right?
My guest is conservative, Conservatarian, conservative libertarian.
Okay. All right. And I was looking it up, and all these companies that it's like Walmart and Amazon and Microsoft that support Black Lives Matter and are giving money.
Yeah.
And I realized that if I'm shopping on Amazon and I'm going to Walmart, I am funding my own destruction.
Yeah.
I'm like, holy crap. What do you guys think about that? Because
I know
if I'm giving money to these people that they've clearly said they hate white people, they want to get rid of white people,
America.
And they want to destroy me.
Yep.
Why? I'm like,
and they hate blacks too because Black Lives Matter is a detriment to blacks. What do you say to that? Would you boycott? Have you noticed that they're supporting Black Lives Matter and putting out these meaningless statements about, there's more work to be done?
I didn't see those, but I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
Now, the problem here is that most likely this money is going to the global Black Lives Matter organization. which means that it's not getting to the people that it's supposed to be helping. You have local chapters of Black Lives Matter that are not necessarily affiliated with the global Black Lives Matter movement. If you've been following the news, a lot of them are taking issue with the global Black Lives Matter movement because they're getting funny with the money. And the local chapters, you have different types of people involved in that, right? I mean, some chapters are more Marxist,
right?
Others are not. As a matter of fact, Utah Black Lives Matter actually supported a Republican candidate. So it's more nuanced when you get down to the local chapters, and you have the mothers of a lot of these victims. You have the local chapters calling out the global organization because they're not actually doing what they say they're doing. So you have these corporations, and you have a lot of white progressives, and in this case, the rank and file, I'll say a lot of these people are well-meaning. They think that they're actually helping Black people when they donate to the global organization, when that money never makes it to Black Lives Matter on the ground, the people who are trying to work to feed the homeless or to provide education or whatever it is a lot of them are doing. They're not getting any of that. The families who are suffering don't see a cent of it. So it's a scam. Yep. It's a total con job. It's disgusting. And again, if you're following Black Lives Matter, you know that people in Black Lives Matter and people who support it are taking these people to task. Like Patrice Cullors bought a new house. Where's that money going? And she may have bought that house legitimately, but what does it say about her that she's living high on the hog while her organization is using dead Black bodies to raise money to push a white progressive agenda? It's disgusting.
Thank you, Wesley. I gotta run, man. We'll call again if you can. Take care, man.
Well, okay, can I just say one thing real quick? Did he just say the BLM people on the ground are helping the poor and the homeless? Like, who are those people?
Yeah, those are the people. Yeah,
man,
that's a good question.
You have to ask yourself what conservative people you bring on, Hake. I mean,
no. But here's the thing. Why don't you know that?
Over the top.
You don't know that because the media doesn't tell you about these people. They only focus.
I've been to their website and seen that they want to destroy.
That's why you don't know anything about
it. But that's the website. That's ideology. There may be some.
The website is the global organization. It's not the local chapter.
There may be some small little Christian misguided Black Lives Matter supporters who don't realize.
Judas told Jesus that he wanted to give money to help the poor. We're talking about Judas here.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Bad people can help the poor.
True. Very true.
If their agenda is Marxist and they want to destroy people, it doesn't matter what good they do.
Thank you, Wesley.
Right,
appreciate it, man.
Though. Not all the local chapters are Marxist.
All right. Thank you. I got to get to Art real fast. We have 3 minutes to go. And Bobby in Texas, if I don't get to you, I will try to get to you first thing in the morning, Bobby. I appreciate you hanging on there. Art in Ohio, go.
What's up with my main man? What's up with my main man? Hey,
nice to hear
my first thing is first with the Black Lives Matter to Jeff or whatnot. That's just like me trying to get with the Pyru Bloods out there in Compton, the gang or whatnot, and then trying to turn them into a holy Christian group. How can I do that when the Bloods Pyru was founded and has a lot of they don't killed a lot of Black people, meaning other gang members. Now, how can I turn around and then try to put that under a Christian group, meaning the Pyrus under the Bloods under a Christian group when they already done a whole bunch of evil? And I mean that towards the Black Lives Matter. Anybody that's saying Black Lives Matter is it's a cult group, and they was founded by lesbians under a bad propaganda, getting the mail out the house, and all this other gay nonsense. How can, if you support that ain't no different than you going and supporting the Pyru Bloods, man. You can't. I mean, you can if you want to, but you still supporting a evil group or whatnot.
I got you.
For the simple fact they was founded under bad terms.
1 minute, Art.
I'm listening, Jeff. Did you get that?
Okay, your response.
Yeah, I got it. You know, and this is what happens when people don't do the research. The idea that everybody who says Black Lives Matter is somehow like the Bloods, it's absurd. I don't support the National Black Lives Matter organization. Hell, I don't even support a lot of the local chapters. All I'm saying is that not everybody who says Black Lives Matter believes in all the Marxist crap. The Marxist crap is the global movement. People can say Black Lives Matter, work in their communities to bring about solutions, and not be Marxist. A lot of these people will work with the police to try to figure out how to have effective policing without having brutality. There's absolute.
Well, hold up, real quick. Well, what's the problem with them just switching it to Negro Lives Matter? What's the whole problem with using Black Lives Matter? And that's because it's an evil, Satanist chant that's part of a cult. If they were so
Black lives is
set on
Satanist?
doing something for Black Lives Matter, they would switch it from Black Lives Matter to Negroes Lives Matter and get some Christian people like Jesse that's for something really, really good, that ain't no scam artists, then you would do that, not roll with a whole bunch of criminals,
So
criminals.
if you change the name to Negro Lives Matter, that would fix the problem.
You know what? I think Black Lives Matter is an invalid statement because they're trying to accuse whites and cops of not valuing black lives when it's blacks who are not valuing their own lives. They're throwing their lives away by fighting with the cops. It's just ridiculous. And they're throwing their lives away being into all this bad for you stuff, the LGBTQ stuff, out of control health-wise, just anger, falsely accusing whites and cops of racism. It's not good for them. That's evil. They're lying when they say that Black Lives Matter because they don't value their own or other people's lives.
For some of them, for a lot of them, that is true, but that's not true of all of them. And I've spoken with some of these people, and that's just not the.
I appreciate it. Art, I gotta run. Take care, man.
Hey, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Some little ethnic child gave a super chat on Streamlabs and said, Jeff holds slave owners more accountable than his single mom who had more of an influence on his life. Any statement to that, Jeff?
That is a very creative misinterpretation of what I said. Yes, that is very creative.
I'm told that the Confederate flag is a Christian flag. It is the cross of St. Andrew. The U.S. flag is secular.
If I put a cross on a gun and shoot you in the head with it, will you think that's a Christian killing? I mean, come on, just because somebody puts that symbol on there doesn't mean that they are representing Christianity. We both know that. We just talked about Judas, right?
But the decent people who fly the Confederate flag today, for the most part, those are just decent people. They're not shooting anybody in the head.
I don't think that.
They're some of the most decent people. The South is falsely smeared.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a fan of the Confederate flag, but I don't think that most people who fly the flag are racist. I will never approve of it. It's not, I mean, what they fought for was evil. I think that some fly the flag because they wish for those days and they want slavery. They hate black people.
I can't imagine them flying slavery
I think
back.
most of them don't. I think most of them just are just talking about the history. That's fine. I can agree or disagree on that. I mean, when Hurricane Katrina happened, I mean, I saw a guy with a Confederate flag help to get black people out of the water. So I don't think that everybody who flies that flag is racist. I would assume that most are not.
Jeff Charles, at Jeff on the Right on Twitter. I appreciate you coming on. Contributor for Red State. Read his articles at Red State and Liberty Nation. A Fresh Perspective with Jeff Charles is one of his YouTube channels. The other is the Red and Black Show, or Red plus Black Show. I appreciate you coming on. We're over time, but any last 1 minute statement from you, Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, I guess all I would say is when it comes to issues of race, I would just say, look at all the sources. Don't just trust what you're being told, whether you're talking about left-wing sources or right-wing sources. There is a lot of nuance here that a lot of our commentators don't like to talk about. And it's okay to talk about these things, and it's okay to disagree on these things. I don't like the idea of just painting everybody as one thing, just like with people who have Confederate flags. I don't paint them all as racist because they're not. I don't paint everybody in Black Lives Matter as people who hate white people because they're not. I don't paint all white people as racist because they're not. So I think we need to have more of these conversations because they are necessary, but we need to have our minds be open. Again, talking about race will not turn you into Al Sharpton. I promise you, it's not going to happen.
But when whites speak frankly about race, I think they need to be encouraged to be able to speak frankly about race because many of them are scared or tiptoeing, and that only feeds the anger and suspicion towards them because then people know that they're hiding something when in reality they know the truth, but they won't say it.
Well, I mean, and some know the truth and some don't. I prefer more speech.
Yeah. I appreciate it, Jeff. It's great to talk with you again. Jeff Charles, at Jeff on the Right on Twitter. Thank you, Jeff, man. We'll talk again.
All right. Thank you.
Take care. This has been the Hake Report, guys. We are over time. TheHakeReport.com for my stuff. RebuildingTheMan.com/church for the throwback Sunday service is happening It's happening at 4 p.m. Pacific time, 7 Eastern, 6 Central time. That's the Throwback Sunday service from Easter Sunday 2012. Check it out. Church with Jesse Lee Peterson Sunday service throwback. It's excellent. And jesseleepeterson.com for the men's conference in mid-August this year, August 14th. For men only, the men's conference, jesseleepeterson.com. No men's forum next Thursday, which is the first Thursday of the month. Normally, guys, we would have it, but unfortunately, we have to cancel it for the first Thursday of May. We'll catch you again. Take care.